One fact is true. We all get older whether we like it or not. As kids, time seems to creep by so slowly, and now that we are adults, we blink an eye and another year goes by. If you were an 80s kid, then you're definitely middle-aged now. You might still think that you're young and cool, but every so often we run into something that makes us realize that we're not. In this video, we will have a look back at some of the things that make us feel old. Many of the products that we consume today were once new in the 1980s. Diet Coke is one of those. I know it seems like it's been around forever, but it was first introduced in 1982. There's a good chance that you may even be older than Diet Coke. And how about fruit roll-ups? These delicious fruit-flavored snacks hit the grocery store shelves in 1983. Golden Girls was one of the many hit sitcom shows of the 1980s. The first episode came out in 1985. It was about four mature women who lived together in Miami and experienced the joys and angst of their golden years. Rue McClanahan, who portrayed Blanche on the show, was 51 years of age when it came out. If you go by that, then Demi Moore at age 60 and Courtney Cox at age 61 are now more than old enough to be Golden Girls of their own. Music was a huge part of our culture in the 80s. MTV hit the air in 1981 and it changed the way that we listen to music. We now had music videos, and if video killed the radio star, then reality TV killed the video star. Part of the fun of MTV was tuning in and not knowing what video or artist would pop up next. Music videos are still around and playing on platforms like YouTube, but for the most part, we select what we want to play. MTV, or music television as we knew it, is no longer around. In 1982, Michael Jackson released his sixth studio album, Thriller. Billie Jean and Beat It were released off of the album early the following year, and they became huge mega hits. The hit single Thriller was released in the UK that November, followed by the US release in January of 1984. Both the song and the video were revolutionary, unlike anything else that had ever come out. It has now become a staple each and every Halloween, and when we hear it playing, it somehow takes us back to the very first time when we heard it. Speaking of music, do you remember going to record shops and looking for your favorite band or the newest hit? Heck, even Target, Kmart, and Walmart had their own music sections. Now with digital download options, music stores are almost entirely gone. Kids today will never understand the joy of spending hours in there, nor the smell of the album when you first opened it. Back to the Future was one of the greatest movies that came out of the 80s. The original movie was released in 1985, and Marty travels back in time to 1955 in style in a DeLorean. In Part 2, which came out in 1989, Marty travels to the future where there are hoverboards, automatic shoelaces, and 3D movie advertisements. The funny thing about that future is that it took place in 2015, which is now in the past. At the time, it was difficult to imagine the future, and now it's difficult to look back and realize how long ago those movies came out. If you are a movie fan, then you'll certainly know who John Candy is. He starred in some of the biggest 80s hits like National Lampoon's Vacation, Splash, Uncle Buck, The Great Outdoors, and my personal favorite, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. What you may not know is that his acting career began in 1973 with an uncredited role in the movie Class of 1944. Sadly, John Candy passed away at the young age of 43 in 1994 on the set of Wagons East. He has now been gone for 29 years, which is longer than his acting career was. Karate Kid the movie was released in 1984. It was about a kid named Daniel, played by Ralph Macchio, who was being bullied by some other kids who were part of the Cobra Kai Karate Dojo. In the film, Daniel befriends Mr. Miyagi, played by Pat Morita, who helps mentor and train him in his Okinawan karate. At the time of the original movie's release, Mr. Miyagi was 52 years old in real life. In more recent years, the Karate Kid franchise was revisited with the Cobra Kai series concept. When it was released in 2018, Daniel-san was now a mentor and sensei of the Miyagi-Do karate, and he was 56 years old in real life, making him older than Mr. Miyagi was when it all began. Hard to believe, isn't it? One of the biggest news stories that captivated America was none other than baby Jessica. At the age of 18 months, she fell into a well in her aunt's backyard in Midland, Texas in October of 1987. It took rescue workers 56 grueling hours to free her from this 8-inch well casing 22 feet below. The story then garnered worldwide attention, and an ABC television movie followed in 1989 called Everybody's Baby: The Rescue of Jessica McClure. Today, baby Jessica is 37 years old and she has no recollection of this horrible event. She is now married and has 2 children, ages 15 and 13. If you were an 80s kid, then you were certainly familiar with the Mr. Rogers Neighborhood. He was the face of children's television in America going all the way back to 1968, which means there are many different people of different ages who loved him. Sadly, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood went off the air and the last episode aired on August 31st, 2001, and the world was never the same. Just days later, 9/11 happened. 1 year later, he delivered a special message that was aimed at keeping us all on track with what was happening. For the most part, kids and teens today have no idea about the joys of watching Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. Perhaps they've seen the recent movie or a very rare glimpse at a rerun, but they really have no idea what it means when you say, "Won't you be my neighbor?" Another childhood staple of 80s kids, as well as other kids in previous decades, was Saturday morning cartoons. This was a time when many kids grabbed their favorite sugary cereal and got their weekly dose of their favorite cartoons. It really was a big thing to experience. Even 90s kids enjoyed this as well. But with DVDs, Cartoon Network, and various other options, it eventually became a thing of the past. The 3 big American networks of ABC, CBS, and NBC have not broadcasted their Saturday morning cartoon lineup since at least 2004. Pac-Man was released in May of 1980, and it quickly gave the world Pac-Man fever. When you think of the video games in the 80s, this is one that is certainly at the top of the list. But can you believe that this video game is now 43 years old? That's the same age that John F. Kennedy was when he became president. One of the biggest movie series of the 1970s and 80s was Star Wars. The Empire Strikes Back was released in 1980, and The Return of the Jedi was released in 1983. During this time period, costumes at Halloween time were huge, and the toys were at the top of many kids' Christmas lists. Today, those costumes and toys are collector's items and can bring a pretty penny if they are in the right condition. This year, Harry and Sally will be celebrating their 34th anniversary, and soon will be celebrating their 46th anniversary of when they first met. If you were a kid during its release at the theater or on video, then you may not have liked this movie, but now that you've gotten older, this may be one that you enjoy a lot more. The movie Big was a favorite of both young and old. It was about a 12-year-old boy named Josh that wishes to be big in front of a Zoltar fortune machine, and he ends up getting his wish to become true. The 30-year-old version of Josh was played by Tom Hanks, who was actually 32 years of age when the movie came out. The 12-year-old version of Josh is played by David Moscow, who is now 48 years old. That makes the young Josh 16 years older than Tom was in the movie. Another thing that kids today don't seem to understand is something as simple as a dial tone, and it's likely that they've never heard one before. They have probably never had the pleasure of hanging up a phone either. Today, they just push a button and then stuff it in their pocket. How we hold a phone today has changed, and when you see kids and adults using hand signals that describe being on the phone, they are completely different. For the most part, time passes by and we barely notice. We keep living our lives day to day and it's relatively the same. But occasionally we hear or see something that takes us back to another time and we quickly realize how much everything has changed. What were some of your memories in the 1980s? Let us know in the comments below. As always, thank you so much for watching.